Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today I am joined by Mike from RTF. That's Restoring the Faith Media. He has a YouTube channel by that name. And he came on my show. I can't remember exactly when. I think it was May. I know that because it was the same day it got leaked that the Supreme Court was going to overturn Roe. And we kind of missed that when that came out because we were doing our chat. So I think it's in May. Yeah, and he talked about the situation he is in with an organization you guys are probably familiar with, Church Militant. That's the one run by Michael Voris and Christine Niles. And we will be talking about that because a lot more has happened since then. But first of all, I just want to say, Mike, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for inviting me back, Alan. You might be surprised to hear I get asked to do interviews all the time, and I usually decline. But I really have felt like you're a very fair interviewer, and that your audience is particularly interested in this story, and I've kind of felt a duty to give them the update on it.
Oh. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah. So in the last 10 or so months, well, first of all, can you maybe give us a recap about how this got started with Father? What's his name again?
Father Jackson.
Jackson. Yeah, Jackson, with Father Jackson, and what he was accused of, and you tried to do the fundraiser and yeah, that stuff.
Sure. Just as a very quick drive-by, flyby overview of what happened. In October/November of 2021, the news broke that Father James Jackson, FSSP, was arrested in Rhode Island for possession of lewd materials involving children. This was a shockwave throughout the traditional world, given his stature, having formerly been the rector of the FSSP seminary, having written the book Nothing Superfluous, which was the gateway to so many people coming to tradition and appreciating the Latin Mass, and finally, given his sterling 15-year reputation outside of the Denver area, in which he was held in such high regard and high esteem that he was elected by his fellow priests, Novus Ordo priests, to the deanery, and wielded a considerable amount of influence in the Archdiocese of Denver. The facts and circumstances around his arrest, to me at the time, looked very, very fishy. I looked at the fact that he had only been in Rhode Island for less than 90 days, hostile territory, behind enemy lines, as it were, in a shared parish situation, which means that the parish is both Novus Ordo and traditional, not owned by the FSSP exclusively. It appeared from the public documents at the time that there's this hard drive that was found in what amounted to a common area. It wasn't in his personal possession. It wasn't clear that it was actually his. It was plugged into a parish computer. There were other people that had access to the building, including employees and other lay people as well. This is basically a church office, which was adjacent to the living quarters of the priests, of which there were multiple that lived there. And the sworn affidavit from the government, which was the justification for his arrest, listed 3 specific times in which there were files transferred from an IP address purportedly belonging to that rectory / office / whatever building. And, just even a cursory glance at the parish bulletin demonstrated that Father Jackson wasn't even present for one of the 3 time periods. So from the beginning, the whole thing seemed implausible, given the fact that, there's a huge target on Father Jackson's back at all times by virtue of the fact that He's one of the primary leaders of the traditionalist movement in the United States, and the reason I found him, which I've never met him and still have never met him and have never communicated with him directly, is that, that he was also a priest who is known for his devotion to the Holy Face, which is one of the things that RTF is known for. So I thought that, given my background in cybersecurity and certifications, military certifications, and background running cyber defense operations for controlled cryptographic and compartmentalized information across 7 different levels of classification, spanning half a dozen time zones, supporting 7,000 users. I ran a tier 1 data center, 24-hour data center, as one of my first assignments in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
I thought, maybe if anyone's going to look into this thing and just put a second set of eyes on it and see if there's any other corroborating evidence that either supports or refutes the government's claim, I would be a good person to do it, because A, I'm emotionally uninvested. I don't know Father Jackson. I'm frankly not even really affiliated with the FSSP at all. And I can put a dispassionate set of eyes on it, because here's the one thing that I did know, or at least what I thought I knew at the time, and what I still think to be the case, that regardless of the outcome of the trial, that there's always going to be theories in the traditional world, because we're by nature, to be a traditionalist, you almost have to kind of buck the trend of what is acceptable by the world standards. We saw through the unspecified virus of unspecified origin very early on. We traditionalists,
Yep.
we have rejected the experimental serums that have been proposed for it. We're the ones that have seen through the massive international money laundering operation in Ukraine from the beginning. And, so by nature, we sort of reject the narrative, because the narrative of the world, the flesh, and the devil is designed to damn us. And so I think that, I'm not saying that we're smarter. I'm not saying that we are holier or anything like that. It's just that it's more, it requires almost, a countercultural backbone even to just be a traditionalist. So as I looked at it, I just figured there's going to be a lot of conspiracy theories around this trial and this outcome, no matter what the outcome is. If Father Jackson is exonerated, then liberals are going to say that, he's still a marked man, and he was accused of something, and he's a bad guy. If he is found guilty, then traditionalists will probably be tempted to say, well, he was framed and it was a setup and all that stuff. And so I thought it was a good and prudential thing to do, to raise as much as possible within a certain amount of time, and divide that up and say, okay, a portion is going to go to Father Jackson's criminal defense attorney. In other words, I want to say, hey, to the Jackson family, you don't have to pay for for the defense of Father Jackson. I didn't know anything about his personal finances at the time. I had no idea what assets he had or didn't have. Didn't know if what I did know was that the Fraternity of St. Peter was not going to pay for his defense. I knew that definitively from discussing it directly with them. And secondly, to put a second set of eyes on all, the entire situation, from his time in the various places that he's been stationed, to see if you could find any victims, because, very likely someone who is guilty of that particular crime, of looking at lewd imagery involving children. I forget what the statistic is, but it's an extremely high statistic of that there's almost always a physical reality associated with the digital reality, especially to people who have access to children. In other words, people who look at that type of material are in most cases also trying to act on that. So the question was, well, are there any human beings in real life who would claim that he tried to act on that? And can we find those people and can we talk to them? And if we can find them and talk to them, that's a data point which is really damning for him and should be referred to a federal prosecutor's office. On the flip side, if somebody doesn't develop the capability, the technological capability, nor the predisposition to go to that extreme. I mean, and the stuff that he's accused of is disgusting. It's way too disgusting to repeat on. But you don't just jump into that, let's say, in a period of 40 days, 60 days, 90 days, even a year. You just don't go there. So there has to be a digital footprint that would lead up to that. So, is there a digital footprint that leads up to that? And can that footprint be found anywhere else in the world? And so that was sort of, so there's a human behavioral element to what I wanted to investigate. There was a technological element to it. And there was a reputational element to it as well. And so I think, I wanted to attack, the problem from those 3 points of view. So we raised $140,000. I got in touch with, and the money came in so fast, or the dollars went up so fast. And what was interesting, it was a give, send, go, or it started off as a GoFundMe. Somebody reported the GoFundMe. I have a good idea who that person is. She has a reputation for reporting people to the authorities all the time, and then reporting that those people have been reported to the authorities as a alleged news person. But we'll get to that later. So the GoFundMe got shut down, and all the money was refunded to everybody. But there was just an incredible demand for people. They said, I want to help Father Jackson, and I want to get to the truth. I got tons of emails and texts and phone calls and from people I've never met, from people I did know for a long time that I trusted, from people that had direct personal daily contact with him for, 10 plus years, 20 plus years, who said, you have to do this. You have to get back in this and do this for him. You have to not only, pay for his lawyer, but you have to help clear his name because we all know that he's innocent. Categorically, I always said, I don't know if he's innocent or not. I've never met him. It looks suspicious. It looks probably like he's innocent. If I had to guess, I think he's innocent. But I'm open to the fact that he might be guilty. And people pushed me back into it. And so there was this waiting period where there was a period where the GoFundMe was canceled and the money was refunded back to everybody. And then I started up a Give, Send, Go. And, in that cooling off period, anyone who made like a hasty or an emotional decision, had plenty of time to rethink what they were doing.
And make like a more sober-minded.
That's right.
decision.
Yeah. Like, if you're scrolling on social media and you see something and you just are emotionally attracted to it and you want to give money to it, and then that money comes back to you and stuff, to be honest, in a lot of cases, you're less likely to do it again. But not only did people do it again, they did it in droves, and it was even bigger. It was double the size of whatever the GoFundMe was. And it got so big that actually I called a priest that I trusted in the northeastern part of the United States. And I said, hey, I think we've raised more than enough. I think we've raised enough at least for his pretrial work. And then I have this portion for some private investigations / some forensic work. Right. But I had a couple people in mind for that I wanted to look into on the forensic scientist point of view, but I really didn't know anybody. I knew a retired FBI agent in Virginia who was involved in exonerating an accused priest, and I had conversations with him. I had conversations with another man who runs a very covert and organized operation dedicated to finding filth in the church, and he said that he was interested in helping out. So I thought maybe one, I could split up the work between one, because one had a more technical background and the other had more of a human intelligence background. So I thought maybe we could kind of split the work that way, between the two different skill sets. And I had these conversations with guys, but it was just loose conversations. Some of it happened on via secure channels. Some of those chats were set to auto delete and all that stuff. So we were taking security protocols throughout the entire time. Around this time, Christine Niles decided that I was a thief. So she went out to Twitter and started accusing me of lying. She made these innuendo tweets, both from the main Church Militant account and from her own. They doxed my name. They started saying that that I was being dishonest about the use of funds. They started implying that I was going to keep them. And there really was there was no real attempt on her part to either ascertain the truth or to report on the truth. She had in her mind what she wanted to report the whole time, and she just decided that Father Jackson is guilty. And so I kind of pushed back on her, and I humored her for a little bit. She ended up emailing me several times, and I answered all of her questions in great detail. Those answers to those questions are on my website.
Go
ahead.
Is it okay if I ask a quick question here? Prior to this whole Father Jackson thing, had you had any personal interaction or like on interaction on Twitter with Niles, Voris, or Church Militant?
Yes. So that's a good point. So prior to this, I had been in touch with Voris over several different issues in the past. I'd been in touch with Church Militant over a couple issues in the past. There was one story that I had initially reported on, and then I found out further information that contradicted what I had reported. And Church Militant was about to go forward with that story, and I stopped them. I reached out on Twitter and I said, "Hey, don't run this story. Here's the updated information. I don't want you to be embarrassed." So in a way, I was friendly with Church Militant. They had featured my podcast on their Mic'd Up. Prior to this, I had met Michael Voris in person in Los Angeles. Been on group text with him with multiple people. Some of his close friends, some of my close friends that happen to know him. So I had fairly regular interaction with Voris at that point. My only real interaction with Christine prior to that was the prior summer, in which she was going off on some anti-traditional, anti-Latin mass, anti-whatever. She's totally opposed to all that stuff. And we had like a little dust up on Twitter. And she had blocked me. And I even remember at one point I reached out to Dave Gordon and I said, "Hey, why did Christine Niles block me? That's so stupid, And then I guess he got her to unblock me. And so I was unblocked. So I was blocked, and then I was unblocked, and then I was, harassed and doxxed and hacked and all that stuff by her. So I would say I had a rocky start with her, and an okay to decent working relationship with Voris, and prior to. So that I think that's a good question, because I think a lot of people are like, "Man, this is so random." And to me, it's not random, given the fact that Michael Voris spent, his entire adult life, at least for the portions that he admits to living the gay lifestyle, using men and discarding them. Well, that behavior hasn't changed. He uses men and discards them. Just ask anyone that he's betrayed in the traditional movement, to include John Henry Weston from LifeSite News, Michael Matt from The Remnant, Dr. McCall and Matt Gaspers at Catholic Family News, Dr. E. Michael Jones, Taylor Marshall. I mean, the list goes on and on of those people that he has used and then backstabbed. So that behavior, even though I would say I had a good working relationship with Voris prior to this, in retrospect, it's absolutely unsurprising that he would behave the way he ended up behaving.
Okay. So, where were we before we went on that?
Well, it was the public accusation phase,
Okay.
which preceded the blackmail phase. So there was a point in time where they were just publicly accusing me of being a fraud and taking the money and being dishonest with donors, and they had no real reason to say this other than they had just decided in their mind that Father Jackson was guilty. So then I had a phone call with Voris, and we chatted one night. Uh, I think it was a Wednesday night, and we talked for over 2 hours. And on that phone call, Voris told me that, look, in these cases where these priests are accused of these crimes, 99% of the time it's true. The government doesn't make mistakes in this regard. The feds never frame anybody.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Did you say Pell? That if the priest doesn't come out and say I'm innocent, then he's guilty. If the priest doesn't come to Michael Voris and beg him for his help and his mercy and say, please, Voris, put me on your vortex and tell the world that I'm innocent, then he's guilty. So it was a very strange conversation. Voris used incredibly crude imagery. I mean, he referred to the traditional movement as a 69, where trads are in bed with each other. I mean, this is the way this man talked. He used expletives, vulgarities that obviously are improper for this venue, and won't be repeated. But he was at some points loud and at some points bombastic and at some points irascible. I'll never forget, he opened up the phone call with, I've won 4 Emmys. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist. Everything I say is true. Everything I report is true. If it's not true, I don't say it. If I do say it, it is true. Do you understand? I mean, it was the strangest phone call I've ever had in my life. It was absolutely surreal. Looking back and now with the knowledge that I have of who he is and how he actually does live even to this day, I can't say that any of it is particularly surprising. But we did end off with the idea that he was very adamant. He said, look, I don't want you to do the investigation portion. We investigate. Okay. You don't investigate. We investigate. If we want to investigate this, we will. And, but we don't want you to investigate it. So you're going to give back half the money that you have pledged for the investigation. He said, you can pay Father Jackson's attorney. That's fine, but do not investigate this case. And when I hung up the phone immediately, I thought, who the hell is this guy? What makes him the arbiter of what gets investigated and what doesn't get investigated? Why
like
does he get
tactics?
It felt like it, to be honest, because it came with a threat. And the threat is written. It's in black and white. It's on my website. It's blackmail. The statutory definition of it is extortion. And it was basically, I'm going to dox you and run stories about you unless you do what I say, unless you give back the money. And he says it in black and white. He texted it to me. But he didn't just text it to me. He started reaching out to my business partners and my business associates. And he started telling them that their business was going to be destroyed, and more or less he guaranteed that fact would happen. And he pretty much guaranteed that he would have a role in that happening, and that the only way to stay back the hand of Michael Voris and the hand of all the bad things that could just potentially randomly happen to our business, which I helped found, was that if they disassociated themselves from me. And so we did that. Initially, it was supposed to be just for a limited period of time, with the idea that when all this blows over, I would come back. But as the church militant crusade against me intensified and continued and evolved, and I mean, I have my own website on their website. They created a whole website about me. They ended up producing dozens of short form videos about me, a handful of articles. They mentioned me in their evening news. I mean, I was the top of their U.S. news. I think for the I still hold the record. I believe for the longest single news story to top their U.S. news. For every, it's like the Casey Kasem countdown. I have the record. I don't think anyone else in history will ever top that. So anyway, so it didn't blow over, and we ended up formalizing my separation, to protect my business partners, because they didn't know what he was capable of, and they're very afraid of him. I mean, he threatened them, and they took his threats very seriously, and they acted in a totally rational way, where they said, we have to protect our job sites, our projects, we have to protect our customers, our vendors, our suppliers. We don't know what this guy's capable of, because by that point they had already gone after me publicly, revealed where I lived, revealed what my name was. Up to that point, nobody knew what my name was. I was one of those anonymous podcasters who never ever released anything personal about myself. Michael Voris went on Tim Gordon's podcast and bragged about releasing my name, bragged about doxing me. They started releasing
that episode. That was really, really ugly to listen to.
Yeah, it was, and it's a shame that Tim even got involved, because some people believe Tim that is a good guy and was trying to call the ball fairly, but given the whole nature of it, and I won't go into it, but Tim very much was unfair from the beginning. I suspect he regrets that now in retrospect, given all that's happened with his family and the plagiarism and all of that. But regardless of all of that, they were gleeful. They were gleeful to dox and harass me. I fought back. Rather than cower or give the money back, I said, you know what? I'm going to proceed with my plan. I didn't need your permission. I didn't ask for it, and I'm not going to. So, I replied back to Voris. I'm not going to give the money back. I replied, Christine Niles sent me an email that said, unless you give every penny back, we're going to destroy you. She was serious, and she carried out that plan, very, very methodically and regularly, and obsessively. But I didn't fold or buckle. I started releasing what was happening to me. I released a video that said, hey, look, they're blackmailing me. Here are the text messages. Here are the emails. Here's the black and white proof. They're trying to blackmail me, and I don't think it's right. In fact, I think it's probably criminal what they're doing to me. As a result of that, they slapped a lawsuit on me. And they, I was in Europe when my wife was served, because in the state I live in, your spouse can be served on your behalf. So here she is homeschooling our brood of children, and the county sheriff walks up our hilltop and serves her the lawsuit. Meanwhile, I'm in Europe working on a project, and
the county sheriff served the lawsuit.
He did, yeah, he did. Wow. So it might be just an ism for where I live. I actually I have no idea.
So,
but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say this thing seems so petty. If you don't agree with someone's fundraiser, just ignore it, or just say, look, he's doing this fundraiser. We recommend you stay away from it, or something like that. But this all seems so petty in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that really enraged them was that I didn't back down or cower from them. They're so accustomed to everyone else in Catholic media cowering. I'm not going to name names or organizations, but all the big ones have editorial policies against even mentioning Church Militant. Everybody categorically ignores them, and just hopes that they go away, and that they live out their useful life, which they already have, and sort of, that we all kind of are witnessing these death throes of a dying organization and a diminishing brand, but that we just kind of do so very quietly without making comment about it. But many people are afraid of what they'll do because they have shown their viciousness to other people. There was a professor at the University of Dallas that they doxed his house, his family, his children. Jeff Kassman in Tennessee, they ran a whole hit piece on him, all because, he tweeted something mean about them. So they're extremely vindictive. And, the idea that, so we had Roe v. Wade being undone in the United States of America. And yet I was the top news story on churchmilitant.com. So, the idea that they pass themselves off as a news organization is so laughable and such a farcical notion. There was a point in time where if you looked at their top 5 news stories, 4 of them were about their enemies. People who were suing them, like Father Dallaire in New Hampshire, who was suing them in federal court in Boston. I've read many of the court documents involved in that case, in which Church Militant has been censured and is losing the case. The judge is totally onto them, just like the judge in my case was onto them. They never won a single motion in my case, not once.
Wow.
They issued a very aggressive motion practice, motions to compel, motions to provide documents, motion to do this and that. They never won once. Every single time the judge shot him down, he was onto them from the beginning. And I think because of how absurd the whole thing was, to your point, I think, this is a Twitter dust up that made its way into litigation, but they ended up using litigation as a sword to try to just get to me. So during the course of the litigation, they demanded that I provide years of tax returns, years of emails, text messages, business documents, mortgage statements, bank accounts information, bank statements. They sent subpoenas to major banking institutions. They sent subpoenas to Twitter, to Give, Send, Go. I provided a full audit of the funds raised and spent. They were raised and they were spent within like 2 weeks, exactly how I said they would be spent, to the penny. $0 retained by yours truly. They wanted to know. They asked me during my deposition, where I went to mass, who my confessor was, how often I went to confession, where I went to confession. They really asked me which priests I talked to or sought advice from for various aspects of this case and in general. So the level of intrusion into my life, and this all didn't happen like in one day. I'm condensing an entire year saga into a couple minutes here with you. There were waves and waves of discovery requests, and then there was the deposition, which was really a total clown show. They treated it as if it was a courtroom appearance by Johnny Depp. They staged cameramen from Church Militant outside the building to film me walking into the building. Their lawyer allowed cameramen with sound equipment to come into the deposition, into the law office, which was a secured building. They were in the common spaces. No, it defies even the basic dignities of the practice of law. And for that reason, we could have walked, and we would have been totally justified, and the judge would have sanctioned them. But I also just didn't want to travel back to Michigan 2 weeks later or whatever. I just said, you know what, we'll just proceed. At one point, their cameraman. So I'm in a conference room with my attorneys, attorney-client privilege. We're talking about issues, and they press the camera up against the glass with sound equipment attached to it. And they're trying to spy on me talking to my own attorneys. I mean, it was the height of professional misconduct. It was all orchestrated. At one point, they wanted my deposition to happen in their studio. And we said, no, we're not going to your studio. We're going to a law firm like normal people. Depositions are generally unexciting events. They're pretty boring. It's statements of fact. It's yes, no, or I don't know. You know, you either know the answer and it's yes or no, or you don't know the answer and it's okay not to know the answer. It's not a memory test. It's not a test of your wit or your imagination. You're under oath, so you either know something with certainty or you don't know something with certainty, and you answer accordingly. And they're usually pretty boring. In fact, Voris's deposition was extremely boring. Besides some of the more colorful language that he chose to use, involving heroin and whatever else. But they turned this into a vortex style event, because the type of people that they are, they can't help but add layers of drama to things that are relatively undramatic. And so as an intimidation factor, they had multiple camera crews there on site. They had, I'll never forget this. It was pretty hot that day. And they had, three schmucks standing outside all day, sweating in the sun, waiting for me to walk outside so that they could film me walking to my car. Again, as if this is the Johnny Depp trial or some Michael Jackson event, or, some famous person walking with his lawyer so that they could capture this B-roll footage for the impending vortex or whatever. But also it's an intimidation technique. It's a very serious thing to prepare for a deposition, to be under oath, to not know anything about what's going to be asked. Anything is on the table. And trust me, everything was on the table when they questioned me. They were asking me about my tax returns and all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do with Father Jackson. Nothing to do with anything.
Just pause for a second. I'm not a legal expert, but who was doing the deposition? Was it their lawyer or the judge?
So in a deposition, there's usually, to my understanding anyway, this is my first one and hopefully last, there's no judge in the room. So it's the two attorneys who are kind of organizing it. They paid for the 4K camera and for the sound equipment. And, they wanted to capture the whole thing from as many angles as possible. They immediately moved to unseal the deposition so that they could start releasing clips of it, so that they could selectively edit it in embarrassing ways. One of their more famous and in their minds very damning videos that came out was me saying, I don't know. But I said, I said, I don't know a number of times in a 10-hour time span, where you're asked to recall things on specific dates or times. And you're advised by your attorneys, if you don't know the answer to the question, don't speculate. That the deposition when you're under oath is no time to speculate. It's not a time to say, well, I think, or I'm pretty sure. You either know an answer to a question or you don't know. And it's okay to not know. It's not a memory test. So slicing together, I don't know, a 10 or so, or even 12 or however many I don't knows into a damning video and say, oh, look, he's evasive. I was under oath for like 10 hours. There were hundreds or maybe thousands of questions asked. I have no idea how many hundreds or thousands of pages the unredacted deposition transcript is. But it was very clear that the deposition had nothing to do with their legal case. They weren't even trying to build a legal case. It was 100% designed to try to embarrass me, to intimidate me, to try to get dirt on me, to release to the public. And that ultimately goes to the heart of their flimsy legal theory in suing me to begin with. It was performative from the beginning, which is why, we were able to achieve an exceptional outcome in settlement, which can only be described as a stunning victory. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But they weren't trying to build up their case against me, nor were they trying to refute my case against them, because I countersued them. When they sued me, I countersued for defamation, tortious interference, and then when I did that, they started adding on all these other really flim-flam charges that were all destined to fail anyway, and they knew it. But they were all just tools for them to try to justify burying me in discovery requests. provide us this and this and this and this, lists, pages and pages and pages of discovery requests, most of which I answered freely. Very little of it did I even object to. If they asked for an email, if they asked for a phone call, if they asked for, a military record or whatever, I just gave it to them. They said, give us proof that you have a top secret security clearance. I said, here you go. They said, give us proof that you're a Security Plus networking certified professional. I said, here's my certificate from 2009. Any other question? So I gave them my mortgages, my tax returns, my bank statements. I gave them anything that they wanted, because I'm not a criminal, and it's like, no matter they even though they were on a mission to sort of paint me as one.
So so it seemed like you gave everything in discovery, but of course this may come up later, but they never gave you a copy of the VHS known as Double Trouble, even though you asked for it in the process of discovery.
I did. I requested Double Trouble. For those that don't know, in 1997, Gary Michael Voris, he went by Gary. His high school name was Gary the Ferry, apparently. Gary Michael Voris published a VHS tape with a man named John Fitzgerald Mola. Those two formed an entity, a single-purpose entity called Concept Communications, which later became Concept Productions. Concept Communications was formed just days before the copyright registration for Double Trouble. John Fitzgerald Mola is a gay man living in the Michigan area who is married, so-called, to another gay man. At the time, he was living with Gary Michael Voris. So Voris and Mola were living together. They were gay lovers, and they were engaged in several real estate transactions with each other. This is publicly verifiable information. You can find it on Oakland County's county records. Those two formed an entity together called Concept. Concept produced something called Double Trouble. Double Trouble was registered with the U.S. Copyright Office. Now, Double Trouble, a VHS tape produced and distributed by two gay men in the late 90s. I wonder what that could possibly be. I wonder, right?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows, right?
Here's why it's relevant to the case. It's relevant to the case because Concept became Church Militant. Let me say that again. The single-purpose entity, which was founded by two gay men, which produced a dubious VHS tape called Double Trouble, became Church Militant, and still to this day is Church Militant. You can track the name changes with the Secretary of State website for the state of Michigan. Concept started doing business as Real Catholic TV, and then it changed its name from Real Catholic TV to Church Militant. So the question that I had was, is Church Militant founded on whatever Double Trouble is? It certainly sounds like it is. It certainly sounds like Double Trouble is what all of you are thinking that it is. And so it would be the height of irony if Church Militant, the foundational stone to Church Militant, was a gay porn. And the question was whether or not Double Trouble was a monetizable asset. Look, if this case actually went to trial and I won punitive damages, I need a list of all the assets that Voris, Niles, and Church Militant collectively own. So I needed to know exactly what Double Trouble was and what its monetary value was and what it was worth. To your question of whether or not they ever said what it was, they gave 3 different answers across 3 different platforms. So I think on Twitter at one point a year or two ago, they answered that Double Trouble was a breaking news piece, which of course breaking news is distributed via VHS, right? Yeah, you would go to Blockbuster Video to get your breaking news. So that's obviously a lie. At some point, his attorney claimed that Double Trouble was a 1999 heist comedy film. At a different point, Church Militant from their main Twitter account claimed, and I can't remember if they claimed this in their court documents as well, which would mean that they lied to the court if this isn't true. That that they claim that it was marital advice. But of course, my question would be, what type of marital advice would two openly gay men who are living together and refinancing a house back and forth multiple times a year in what looks like a fraudulent mortgage refinancing scheme, like what marriage advice would two homosexuals give to people that would be distributed on a VHS tape? And if it was marriage advice, indeed, if Double Trouble indeed was marriage advice, why can't you just provide the tape to prove it, to clear the air?
Yeah, and like it seems odd that you have given your personal bank accounts, your emails, your mortgage documents, like the most personal things, and he's not even cooperating in giving you a VHS. I'm curious. Michael Voris co-did this with that guy whose name was Mola, right?
Yes.
Have you met him personally?
I did. I found where John Fitzgerald Mola lives, and I visited him at his home on the same trip that I was there for my deposition. So I thought, hey, while I'm in town, I might as well do a little investigation on our friends here. And
I'm sure you asked him about.
I did, and I will withhold exactly what we talked about in this venue, but suffice it to say, I have met John Mola. I've had a conversation with him, and I don't believe any of the three explanations that Church Militant has offered for what Double Trouble is.
Oh, because it conflicts with Mola's, because he was equally involved in it, right? So, oh, well. Huh, well, that's interesting. So, all right. So, where were we? We got off on a tangent.
Yeah, I don't know. We were proceeding through the case. At some point you interviewed me, and I said, hey, I'm getting sued. I've lost at this point I've lost my job because my partners, rightfully, I think, wanted to protect the business and our customers and our projects. And so they said, look, we don't want Michael Voris coming after us. He made overt threats to them. I'm still in possession of some of those threats. He doesn't even know that I have them. I've now at this point, they started calling me a Nazi online, a racist. Voris is running around the country telling people that, that I called Christine Niles a chink. I never did that. They even had to admit online that was a lie. So Christine, Michael, and the Church Militant main account are all telling literal lies about me almost on a daily basis. They're tracking my movements. They're tweeting on the weekends and nights and weekdays about my Jeep or my mortgage or even at one point she was tweeting about my scarf. She was saying that, oh, that's a wool scarf. It must be expensive, or something, to that effect. Like, just kind of implying that I steal things or I live the high life or whatever. So when a Google search for your name says that you're a Nazi and a racist and you steal money, and they just keep putting out story after story after story, fast and loose with the facts, zero corroboration, zero evidence to back up their claims, literally just assertions, and they put it at the top of their US News. It's kind of like, well, when you go to apply for jobs and stuff, people Google you. So I spent a good time sort of unemployed, but also I was in this weird period where I was thinking, okay, I may reconcile with my business partners. I may come back to the business. I may help them out. They were working on a major project at the time with one of the most important people in the country. And, so I was hesitant to get a full-time job because I was kind of holding out hope that we were going to reconcile. I kept thinking, okay, we're going to settle, once they get my this or that, then we're going to settle. There can't be anything else that they want. They can let them write the final piece that they want to write. And, and I almost got to the point where I was like, just let them lie, let them lie. And who cares? It's It's a shrinking demographic of low information boomers that subscribe to them. They've unmasked themselves as the absolute controlled opposition, enemy of tradition that they truly are. In a way, even if I appear to lose in the public, I was thinking I still win because I've unmasked them. I've shown the people how malicious and wicked and vindictive they are, especially Christine Niles. So it's a win. And look, you can even see that to this day. She is now trying to repair her reputation. She's got this new podcast where she's trying to focus on positive things. She's trying to appear not to be the vindictive liar that she's been for years, where she continues to be caught publicly lying. And she developed this moniker of Nazi Niles. People were calling her Nazi Niles before I ever even knew who the heck she was. There's plenty of evidence of that online. Frank Walker has been calling her Nazi Niles for years. And the reason why she's called Nazi Niles is not because she's a Nazi, it's because everyone she doesn't like, she just labels them as a Nazi. Voris calls SSPX attenders, Nazis and, child abusers and whatever else.
The stuff he says about the priests of the SSPX and like the organization and the people that go there, like, that's stuff that I don't think even Father James Martin would say, like a low unto itself,
Right.
It's okay. It's a group you don't agree with, treat them with respect.
Yeah. They continue to say that I'm a racist, even though I have the most racially diverse, regular occurring podcast in all of Catholic media. I have an African, a Jew, a Mexican, and me. Okay. And we appear every Friday. I'm married to a Mexican. We speak Spanish at home. She speaks Spanish to the children. So if I'm a racist, if I'm a white nationalist, if I'm a member of some alt-right, group that they claim that I'm a member of, I'm pretty sucky at it. When it comes down to it, I'm probably the world's worst racist of all time. But again, none of their claims ever stand up to reality. And this is why I think I've overwhelmingly won. Not only did I win in settlement, which we'll get to that, but I think I've won insofar as they are permanently unmasked now. They're permanently marred and damaged by what they did to me. It's one thing to go after a guy like Jeff Kessman who really can't fight back, who doesn't have a platform, and also didn't have the interest in engaging with them for 18 months. But with me, they picked on the wrong guy, because I'm not going to back down from a fight. I'm not going to go out of my way to pick a fight with people. But if you bring the fight to my doorstep, which they literally did, they brought the fight to my doorstep when the county sheriff served my wife when I was in Rome. Then I fought back, and I revealed to the world the level of intensity and maliciousness that they were willing to go into, the extreme levels of maliciousness to try to cancel a Catholic father, husband, who's a hobby podcaster, a hobby, news journalist, who otherwise is a very high functioning member of society. I'm not like a guy who drives for Grubhub and trolls on Twitter and makes memes about them and whatever. I have a very, very successful career in multiple fields, have won national awards for the various things that I've accomplished in my life, and am happy to share the splendor of the Catholic faith with people in my own podcast, which is why it exists to begin with. And they admitted, and Christine Niles admitted under oath, that she called the cops on me. She called federal and state prosecutors, police forces, federal police. She filed criminal complaints. She filed a complaint with the Marine Corps. She showed up to my administrative hearing in the Marine Corps, which she started and she engineered. And she admitted under oath that she started it and engineered it, and she filed the complaint. And then she showed up, and she was even willing to use left-wing cancel tactics against me. She testified under oath that I should not wear the uniform of the United States of America because of my anti-LGBTQRS tweets. Now, this is a woman who claims to support the traditional Latin Mass, the Catholic faith. She has her forward boldly, which is a slap in the face to Joan of Arc. Yeah, we'll leave that one aside. Here she is professing to be somebody who advances the cause of Catholicism. But when it comes down to it, when the rubber meets the road, she is willing to, under oath, having sworn an oath on a Bible, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. While under oath, this woman supported the LGBT agenda. I mean, if that's the most fraudulent thing you've ever heard. Meanwhile, on the backside of that, she goes out and fundraises saying that they don't support the LGBT agenda. She personally has written articles about how the military has gone woke, about how the military supports gays, about how the military has lost its way. And then she comes into a military courtroom and testifies that I shouldn't wear the uniform because I don't support gays. This is the level of malice that these people have. And this happened after settlement. Our civil lawsuit had been over for over a month. She made herself available in October of last year to continue to pursue me post-settlement, to continue to try to achieve a dishonorable discharge, which she failed. I beat her.
Oh, so you didn't get dishonorably discharged then?
I did not get dishonorably discharged. I was discharged under honorable conditions. They lied in their news article, just like they lied in all their news articles about me. It was full of misinformation, disinformation, sideways facts. I requested a discharge long ago. I didn't want to take the COVID vaccine, and I requested to get out of the Marine Corps because specifically I had a religious accommodation request. I pursued that as long as it would go. It was denied. I appealed it. I got the highest ranking Catholic chaplain in the Marine Corps, the chaplain for the DOD, a 1-star general, to specifically by name endorse my religious accommodation. And the Marine Corps didn't give a single religious accommodation to a Christian of any variety. And so they started drumming me out. So I said, okay, well, I'd like to leave. I submitted my paperwork to leave long ago. I wanted to be discharged. I didn't want any part of it anymore. I asked to leave. But because of Christine Niles, because of her anonymous complaint that she filed with the Marine Corps, I was placed in this administrative political prisoner type status where the government assembled, this 500 plus page dossier about me that I never got to read. And it included, and she personally contributed to it for months. She had dozens, if not hundreds of interactions with the United States government for months. She sent them photos of tweets or retweets or likes, anything that went against the woke agenda, she sent to the military for months. I saw it in black and white. It's in the government's 550-page dossier that they compiled about me. So what started as a COVID investigation then was transformed into something else. And it turns out... Yeah. Exactly. It turns out that, if you believe what the Catholic faith teaches at all in public, you're unfit for service in the Marine Corps. And in any other reality, if I wasn't an enemy of Church Militant, I would have been featured as a hero on their rag. They would have featured me as a Marine officer gets fried by the Marine Corps for standing up to the experimental serum, for defending the rights of the unborn, and for saying that men and women, are the only way that God designed marriage. That is ultimately why I was sent out of the Marine Corps, with the exact same discharge, by the way, that I would have gotten regardless of their interference. So in a sense, they lost in the civil courtroom, they lost in the administrative military courtroom, they lost every single time that they filed a motion in the civil case. Not one motion did they win. And even after the fact, Alan, and this is the really sad part, we settled in September, and then they filed a motion. So when you settle a case out of court, it means you don't go to the courtroom. There's no public testimony. You don't actually go to court. You settle. Both sides agree to withdraw their case, and we did that. The terms of the settlement agreement are confidential, and that's by design. And so that neither side can say, hey, we won or we lost or we got this or we got that. They violated the confidentiality of the settlement agreement almost immediately. They started bragging about the concessions that I gave in the settlement agreement. Meanwhile, they were absolutely radio silent on the concessions that they gave in the settlement agreement. They published an article saying that they won, even though technically nobody actually wins. And then, after they realized that gloating about winning, gloating about a 65-member organization, 65 full-time employees, $10 million annual operating budget, going up against a guy with a podcast, gloating about it really started to backfire. And I held back. I held back for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I kept my peace. I let them say what they wanted to say. And at the end of that period of time, when they said everything they wanted to say, and people still turned on them, they got so mad at me that they tried to open up the case again. And they filed another motion. You think, oh, I'm settled. Okay, it's over. It's gone. This black cloud is gone.
I thought they won. What are they trying to do, right?
Yeah. So they try to open up the case again because they're so unhappy with the outcome of the settlement that they agreed to. So you're so unhappy with your victory that you try to open the case again. And they filed this motion with the court. And, every time you file a motion, then you have to file a counter motion and a response to it. And the attorneys bill you by the hour. So this was just another one of their cynical ways to drive up the legal costs for one guy who's using his personal money to try to defend himself, versus people who are playing with house money, 501c3, right? Tax exempt organization. If you look up their 501c3, they're designed to promote the Catholic faith. That's what they say that they do. What about laundering your money, your tax exempt status, into suing people into oblivion? Promotes the Catholic faith? Nobody actually knows that. That question can't be answered. But so they try to open up the case again because they're so unhappy with the blowback that they got from the gloating that they did for 6 weeks. And they were so pissed off about my silence in that period of time that they wanted the judge to intervene. And, prior to that, for every motion that they lost, the judge would just issue one sentence saying this motion is denied. Never gave a reason. I think on one occasion he maybe gave a reason, I think for one of the motions involving the fact that they had brought the cameras into my deposition, we noted that. We wanted the judge to be aware of that. And he was like, for reasons cited in defendants, whatever. In this case, when they tried to open up the case again, the judge issued a multi-page scathing rebuke that was so definitive. It was so one-sided. It was so clear. It was so, it was so incredible. I don't think it's confident. I could probably publish it. I just have no interest in doing that. They were so completely humiliated by the judge at this point that they finally just disappeared. And
So
by this point, they had done the military thing. By this point, they had tweeted after the fact that they were going to keep exposing me until I deleted and retracted. So I never deleted anything. I never retracted anything. And so, but they claim to have won. But then they blackmailed me again in the public. That's a blackmail. They said, we're going to keep going after him until he does what we want. We're going to keep exposing him until he retracts and deletes, until he apologizes. And I never did any of those things, either in settlement or post-settlement, and I still haven't. And I stand by everything that I've ever tweeted about them, and I stand by everything that I've ever published about them. And yet, even after the blackmail, even after supporting LGBT under oath, even after lying under oath, which she did, and I have proof of that. That's called perjury. They finally, Alan, have sort of stopped directly tweeting about me, and they've left it to their paid employees who are their little troll farm. So they've created a bunch of fake anonymous Twitter accounts in the last 90 or 180 days, and those accounts are constantly tweeting about me. Those accounts have intimate knowledge of the case that only Church Militant could possibly have. Those accounts, they go after my wife. They go after my personal life. They go after my day job, my business. I had to start a business locally here where I live to get away from them and to become uncancelable. And they're still attacking even that. So they haven't gone away, but it's gone from a kinetic war that's fought out in the public, which they lost decidedly and decisively, to a cold war that is still being waged beneath the surface, and which even in that environment, in the irregular social media environment, they are still losing to one guy. I'm one guy sitting here with you talking to you tonight. I'm one guy who has, half a dozen children and a day job, and has sustained an incredible financial loss because of these people, but is still soldiering on and still willing to speak the truth. And by the way, I would note, I'm going to abide by the terms of the settlement agreement, and specifically its confidentiality. So I'm not going to tell you what they had to give up. I'm not going to tell you all the losses that they've sustained, but I will just direct everybody's attention to the fact that if you were to go in the Wayback Machine and you were to check out some of their reporting about me from back then versus what their reporting is about me today, they might not be the same. And you can infer from that whatever you want. But I'm not the one who had to retract. I'm not the one who had to delete. I didn't have to change any of my reporting. I didn't have to do any of those things. I apologize for their hurt feelings, for the thin skin of Gary the Fairy and Nazi Niles. And otherwise, I think I got a pretty darn good deal. And I'll just say this: in my opinion, subjectively, I won't quantify this, and I can't quantify it. Compared to the terms that they thought they were going to get versus the terms that they got their asses kicked. And wow. I'm proud of that.
Wow. And and I know you still have some legal bills. We've put a link to your so people, if they have some extra cash, they could donate to your legal expenses.
Yeah. I would appreciate that. I have come out of pocket. A lot of larger Catholic family, and I'm not even I'm like a medium-sized Catholic family. A lot of medium-sized
by Latin mass standards.
Yeah, right. A lot of medium-sized or large Catholic families, don't have $60,000 in the bank to spend on legal bills for a frivolous lawsuit. Thanks be to God, I was able to spend $60,000 on this frivolous lawsuit. I still have tens of thousands of dollars of legal bills that are unpaid. I've never done a fundraiser for it. I've never made a video for it. I've never done this whole marketing campaign to try to fundraise to try to pay those bills. Because look, we live in the Biden economy. Everybody's suffering. Inflation has caused great heartache to a lot of people. Usury, um, unemployment is not what they state that it is. People are suffering, and frankly, people have fatigue about this conflict. I would be surprised if this video even gets as many views as your initial interview with me, because I think people are just so tired of the back and forth. They view it as like a back and forth between two equals. It's not a back and forth between two equals. I'm one guy with a hobby podcast who stood up to defend a priest who got, and he's gotten totally lost in this whole discussion.
Well,
I'm one guy that wanted to do the right thing for someone that I've never even met before. Other people who are professional grifters online, who make their living online, every so often get quote unquote canceled, right? I got canceled as being a high school teacher, so I'm going to raise $100,000. Oh, I got canceled again by Patreon, so I'm going to raise another $50,000. People are professionals at milking this system. From the canceled this guy, from the canceled clerics to the canceled this to all this stuff, and I've never gone and said, hey guys, can you help me pay $40,000 of legal bills? I'm going to go on a payment plan, maybe for the rest of my life. It's a cross I'm going to bear for the rest of my life because of the decisions and the malice of Michael Voris and Christine Niles. Something that my children have to suffer: the loss of our health care through TRICARE, the loss of of my retirement pension, which I had 15 years of honorable service to our nation, including combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple personal awards, a sterling military record, on track for lieutenant colonel and slated for command. All of that lost, sent down the drain because of the malice of Michael Voris and Christine Niles. My anonymity removed, my good name tarnished online. If you Google me, I'm supposedly a Nazi and a racist, the worst racist ever, right? All of that because of the malice and the wickedness of Christine Niles and Michael Voris online. I've never gone out and said, hey guys, they have the black cloud of Church Militant has affected every corner of my life. There's nowhere where I go, there's no situation that I am in that they have not touched. I even went to a private invitation-only retreat with Father Ripperger in Tulsa, Oklahoma, after the settlement, and there was a tweet where there was a picture of like Taylor Marshall and some other people, and I was seen in the background by Michael Voris and Christine Niles, and they immediately started texting members who were there at the retreat, telling them what a dirtbag I am, what a liar I am, how they need to disavow me, how I should be kicked out of the retreat. This is not the behavior of somebody who wins a lawsuit. This is not the behavior of somebody who has victory in settling a lawsuit. We were post-settlement by this point, and they were still so obsessed with me. I can't go anywhere where if I'm going to be online, I'm going to be smoking cigars on Thursday night with a very famous Catholic. Those pictures are going to come out. That guy's going to get a text message from Michael Voris. I'm calling it right now. Later on Saturday night, I'm going to be with another famous Catholic. When that happens, Michael Voris is going to reach out to that person because that has been his pattern of behavior: to isolate, to drive a wedge, and to blackmail. And so for people who think that this is a fair fight between two media organizations or whatever, I'm one guy who just wants to talk about the faith and defend a priest versus an entire organization that is in possession of tens of thousands of pages of documents about me, who selectively leaks some of them online at will, who violates the terms of our settlement agreement, especially the confidentiality of it, with impunity, and who continues to even blackmail me in the public, online, in front of God and country, knowing that nobody will take any action on it. It's no wonder that the FBI is not looking into Church Militant. It's no wonder.
Wow. Oof. No, this is quite the story. Well, I'm glad that the settlement worked out well, and
Thank you.
Is it okay if I change topics a little bit here?
Yes, sir. Your
Have you
show.
have you got any updates on Father Jackson? Or
Yeah, I mean, to update folks from the last time we spoke, you know, some people may not be aware he was released on bond, and he was staying with his family in a Midwestern state. And around July of this past summer, Father Jackson was arrested in that Midwestern state again, and he was remanded back to Providence, Rhode Island, where he remains in custody and in jail. The state of Kansas has yet to, now, what is today? February 13th, the day before
Yep.
St. Valentine's Day.
Yep.
So July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, 8 months later, the state of Kansas has not brought any new charges against the man. Contrary to what was reported in, by the people who play lawyers on TV but never practice law and don't even have valid standing with the bar. So 8 months later, still waiting for the state of Kansas to bring new charges against Father Jackson. The only thing that is publicly known is that he violated some term of his release agreement. Since then, he's filed a couple motions, and those motions have been more or less motions to extend the time between when the trial starts. So he continues to buy himself time. Those motions state various reasons for why he needs more time. Those reasons have included things like, we need time to evaluate our options to negotiate a plea, a deal. We need more time to conduct forensic review of the government's evidence. So he's provided multiple reasons to continue to buy time between now and trial. But he's not taken a plea deal. He has pled not guilty. And all of the publicly available information indicates that he is continuing to fight the government's claims and assert his innocence. And I think this is a really important point, Alan, because the man has pled in the court of law not guilty. He has a legal team working in overdrive right now on his behalf. He has not taken a plea deal despite the predictions and prognostications of the chattering class who claim that it was imminent. Well, it never happened so far. And we believe in this country that a man has the right to remain silent, that silence cannot be used to impugn guilt, that he has a right to a vigorous legal defense, and that he is proven or presumed innocent until and unless he is proven guilty by a court of law, and in this case, beyond the shadow of a doubt. So he's not been in trial yet. He's neither been proven innocent nor guilty.
Is there a trial date?
There's not a trial date.
Okay.
To my knowledge, there continues to be. I think recently they extended it another 60 or 90 days. I'm not sure. So we're several months away from even knowing when the next thing will be. One of the things that I was criticized for pretty heavily by Church Militant was, oh, he never released a report. It's funny. They say this full well knowing that it takes several years for a criminal case to develop. Some of their most highly viewed content, including content that they developed with Michael Archer, who was the forensic scientist in this case working for me. Back when he did work for Church Militant, he was a good guy. Now he's a bad guy, and they hate him, and they've impugned him and calumniated him and harassed him and all this stuff. But when he was a good guy and he worked for them, he worked on stories for them for upwards of like 18 months developing a story before those stories would get released. And then meanwhile, a year ago, just weeks into this whole thing, Christine Niles was like, well, where's the report? She knows that there's not going to be a report that early on, and that it takes years to develop these things. She knows that because her work products often take years to develop. And she knows that because Michael Archer has worked with her for years developing work products. So the whole attack on me publicly about the fundraiser and the forensic scientists and the private investigation aspect of it it's patently absurd, disingenuous from the beginning. But what they're playing on, this is what they do for a living. They play on the ignorance of their audience. And who can be argued, like who in American society is more ignorant than the low information boomer? And that's their core demographic, the low information boomer. Somebody who is retired, who is right of center, fiscally or whatever. And they're pissed off and they've had enough already. And probably half of their kids are gay, but they've had enough already. And they're going to give part of their fixed income, to Church Militant in the form of 501c3 tax-exempt donations, which are then laundered into, lawfare, like what they've done to me, like what they're doing to Father Dallaire, like their frivolous case in the city of Baltimore, where they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I just want to make this one point while we're talking about money and lawfare and legal expenses. I estimate that Church Militant, all in, fully burdened, has spent $500,000 going after me. $500,000 going after me. That is the cost of their staff that have stalked and harassed me for well over a year. The cost of the video production that they have used for well over a year, dozens and dozens of times. The cost of authoring articles and proofreading them and adding graphics to them and publishing them on the websites, the systems that they use, the software, the data storage, everything that they use in their warfare against me. The hacking campaign, which we didn't even talk about, but they attempted a phishing campaign where they ended up phishing a 16-year-old boy, trying to get his personal information just to try to get to me. The legal fees directly that they have paid, the overhead fees that they have paid in trying to account for all the fees that they have paid. It goes on and on and on and on. When you add it up, this organization has spent somewhere between 5 and 10% of their operating budget going after me. I am aware of an email in which a member of Church Militant tells another investigative journalist, we do not have time to pursue this story that you're bringing to us because we as an organization are preparing for the deposition of RTF Mike. That is how invested in destroying me this entire organization of 65 people became. From graphic design to post effects to social media to you name it, quality control. As far as I know, they probably had eyes on me in the public. As far as I know, they probably have been to my house. They probably have been to my hometown. They probably have interviewed people. They've sought out people from my past. $500,000, maybe even $1 million spent trying to stop me from doing this interview with you, Alan. $1 million, possibly, certainly $500,000, trying to destroy me because I said, you know what, Gary Michael Voris, I didn't ask your permission to support Father Jackson, and I'm still going to support him regardless of your opinion about it.
Amen. Well, no. Well, let me tell you something. Like you talked about how you exposed Church Militant. I just want to say a personal story. Like I've been in the Latin Mass community for over 10 years. Back in the day, in 2013, I actually met Michael Voris in person. I actually have a picture of me next to Michael Voris. I'm not going to share it, but like the amount of all of my friends who go to Latin Mass, who are conservative Novus Ordo, or just pretty much all the Catholics I know, now none of them have a shred of respect for him. Like back in the day, they thought he was cool. He's going to town. He's fighting for tradition. He's fighting for the faith. He's going after Protestants. He's doing this and that. Now, none of my the people I associate care for him at my parish. None. Just they just think he's a joke. They'd rather listen to Taylor Marshall or someone else. So yeah, no,
that's been my anecdotal experience as well. And I've had the good fortune to travel this country quite a bit. Coast to coast, border to border. I've been to dozens of Latin Mass communities around the country. In part of my former career, it was a necessary function of what I did. And so I feel like I have had and continue to have my finger on the pulse of the traditional community, of which I've been a member for as long as you, Alan. And my subjective experience has been roughly the same, that the Latin Mass community is chock full of former fans of Church Militant and Michael Voris. And I'll tell you this, I used to watch The Vortex in 2009, 10, 11. I watched The Vortex and I thought, wow, this guy's really brave. He's exposing the Lavender Mafia and all this. But we never really were, I guess, bamboozled into giving him any money, thanks be to God, especially now that I know, what that money would commingle with, and what it would be used for, two very perverse ends. But when he came out and said that he was gay in 2016, I wasn't surprised at all. I don't think a lot of people were. I know some people were. I think a lot of low info boomers were surprised. But what's even more surprising is how he's been able to spin that into, how he's the St. Augustine of our time. St. Augustine didn't walk out of Mass on January 21st, 2022, minutes before having received our Lord in a traditional Latin Mass on the tongue, and then start lying on a hot microphone. Demonstrable lies that are so damning that he even had to walk them back in his deposition and online. That's not how St. Augustine was. This guy tries to paint himself as like reformed and, the leader of the formerly gay, people. Milo has gone after them, called them fake trads, using traditionalism to fundraise. Siambria has left the Catholic faith, and has cited people like them as the reason why.
That guy has issues, though.
Yeah. I mean, he has issues. But in terms of these former gays that are all in low orbit around Gary the Fairy, it's never sustainable, because as E. Michael Jones writes in his book, The Man Behind the Curtain, Michael Vortex and the Homosexual Vortex, which is back in print, by the way, $15. It's a great read. It's on culturewars.com.
Yeah, but I've got the two actual physical copies.
You got the book, yeah.
I don't have them on me, but
yeah,
they're somewhere.
I have lots of copies. I actually thought about doing a fundraiser, a GoFundMe or a Give Send Go, to raise enough money to buy 1,000 copies of it to send it to every single seminarian in Detroit and New York, just so that everybody would know the truth about Michael Voris. But as Dr. Jones writes in his book, a guy like Voris, who spent his entire life using other men and then discarding them, it is absolutely common practice that he has no friends. He has no male friends to speak of. There's not one who will come on camera and say, hey, I'm a lifelong friend of Voris. I'm a close friend of Voris. I'm Voris's best friend. He has zero male friends because of how his psychology is.
He's no longer friends with Mola.
No, he's not friendly with John Fitzgerald Mola. John Fitzgerald Mola has, let's just put it this way, he has nothing nice to say about one Gary Michael Voris. In the homosexual community, when these guys are over each other, it's always dramatic, it's always explosive, it's always emotional, because at the end of the day, these people are self-hating. They hate themselves. They hate their own bodies. They hate themselves. They hate their own psychology, and that's why the act that they engage in is an act of violence and destruction to another man's body. It's blood. I hate to say this on your podcast. It's blood and feces mixed in with one other substance, which I won't say. It's so vile that demons can't even watch it. Demons who seek our destruction, who want to drag our souls to hell, demons who are guided by an eternal intelligence that never rests, never sleeps, never gives up, that knows our nature better than we do. Demons flee from that act, which is the mixture of feces and blood, and because they can't even witness it. It is so intrinsically disordered to the nature of man, and it is such an act of hatred and destruction. But that hatred and destruction never ended with Michael Voris. The hatred and destruction portion of his psychology was never healed, because he never spent any time in real quiet penance. He went from a public figure as a homosexual to a public figure as a convert. And there was no pass and go, no collecting $200. It was just straight on to the next thing. And so the patterns of behavior, the habitual behavior, never changed. I don't know whether or not Michael Voris still lives the gay lifestyle. I don't know. Like, for example, Milo had a sodomy clock, and his sodomy clock would periodically reset to 0. And he maintained this sodomy clock even while he worked at Church Militant. Michael Voris has never released his sodomy clock. We don't know how many times his sodomy clock has periodically reset to 0. What we do know is that he lives in a big house with lots of bedrooms and frequently has men staying with him. We know this because he admitted it in court documents. We do know that he walks around and likes to answer his door wearing nothing but a towel when he knows that another man is knocking on his door. What we do know is that he texts pictures of himself, shirtless, half naked, to various people, and sometimes texts them to the wrong people, and those text messages find their way into the wrong hands. Talking about fat fingering people. What we do know is that he lives a very enigmatic lifestyle where he is surrounded by primarily young, unmarried men under his employment. So the habitual patterns of behavior of using and abusing men, of hating yourself, of the ultimate, the penultimate act of self-destruction and violence to another man's body, those behaviors never died. They never were reformed, and he is not the St. Augustine of our time. And if anyone wants to understand more about the homo narcissist type of personality, they can pick up that book by Dr. E. Michael Jones on his website. And I'll just say this about the book. Nothing I ever said about Michael Voris ever even compares to what E. Michael Jones claims in his book. Jones says that Voris is still living a gay lifestyle, that he wears diapers, that he's HIV positive, that his father sexually raped him when he was an infant. Jones talks about his first husband, his second husband. One of them died in a plane crash. Jones talks about very, very disgusting and sordid details about Michael Voris's life. And yet Voris never sued E. Michael Jones. He never slapped him with a lawsuit. He never sent him a demand letter. He never demanded that he retract it. He never even countered the book. And yet all I did was say, hey, you're blackmailing me. And he slapped me with a frivolous lawsuit that we got out of and we won. That almost begs the question. If E. Michael Jones on a much bigger platform and in written form says these things, and you didn't sue him for defamation, does that mean that they're true? Does that mean that you do wear diapers? Does that mean that you do have HIV? Does that mean that you did sleep with a priest named Father Bruce Jackson? Does that mean that your husband died in a plane crash? Does that mean that you have Mickey Mouse posters in your house, Gary Voris? Does that mean all of the things that your father raped you when you were a child? Because you didn't sue when E. Michael Jones made those claims. And so if you didn't ask him to retract it, and there's no evidence that you did ask him to retract it, then maybe it is true. Maybe all of it is true.
I think everyone should go and read that book. I don't think it's that expensive. If you need, go find the old copies, because he just took the two articles and merged them, as far as I know, right?
Correct. Yeah.
A question for you, Mike. Hi, Mike. Are you still on YouTube? Love watching your shows in the past.
Thank you, Carol. It was a pleasure producing them in the busyness of the lawsuits, and in trying to discern a new career, protect my former business partners, protect their very important clients and all that. I sort of took a break from it. Now that I'm in a new career and I've launched my own business, and I'm finding out what it's like to have full-time employees and all this stuff, I'm extremely busy, and it's a great learning experience. I'm loving it, and I'm doing real things for real people in my community, helping them out with their houses and whatnot. I plan to get back on YouTube. We still do the rundown every Friday. The rundown is sometimes on RTF, sometimes on the Rundown YouTube channel. And every now and then I'll do an interview for YouTube. But I intend to get back into it. And now I've launched a weekly show that's carried on the Crusade channel with Mike Church. So you can go to crusadechannel.com and you can sign up for that if you want to hear it. It airs on Tuesdays. And after Easter, I intend to do a full hour every day that will be simultaneously carried on the Crusade channel. It's called Parrot Talk, 2 T's. And then portions of it, some amount will be free on RTF, but if you want the full hour every day, it'll be on the Crusade channel. But yeah, I've been able to teach as an adjunct professor at the collegiate level. I've started 2 businesses. I still have RTF kind of going. I was facing the military, nonsense that Christine Niles had started, and the lawsuit and all that. So is a lot, plus 6 children, plus, God willing, more on the way, and a very demanding social life. So, I apologize. I haven't been on RTF that much, but I intend to get back on.
Yeah, no, but it sounds like there's a lot of good stuff coming in the future. So, just a question here, if you have an answer to it. This is more of a question for E. Michael Jones. What's his connection with Voris? How did he do his research for the book? As far as I know, I could be wrong about this, but I heard somewhere he got a hold of several hundred emails. I don't know where or if that's even true. Do you know?
Well, that's my understanding. I mean, it seems to me that his primary sources for the book are members of the board of directors, former members of the board of directors, and officers of Church Militant. I have personally spoken to several members who were high-ranking, either boards, members of the board, and or full-time employees at Church Militant, who have verified many of the things in E. Michael Jones's book. Again, when you have a habit of backstabbing, betraying, and destroying people around you, inevitably, and it's only a matter of time before you end up turning on everyone, and then those people become disgruntled and want to tell their side of the story. I I know with moral certainty that the sourcing for E. Michael Jones's book are people with firsthand knowledge. I know that with moral certainty. And I can vouch for the fact that E. Michael Jones is a avid researcher and, and somebody who leaves no stone unturned. That being said, I believe that I am in possession of even more damning evidence for the misdeeds of one Gary Michael Voris than even EMJ had access to. And some of that is still forthcoming. So I do look forward to releasing all of that in the future. It is in the service of the public. The public has a right to know who these people are. And when it comes out, it's going to be extremely explosive. It will be far more explosive than anything that I or E. Michael Jones has ever said about Church Militant. We'll just put it like that.
Wow. Is that coming sometime in 2023 or?
Yeah. It's imminent. In fact, most of it's already done. So even if I die, it's set to auto release. By the way, I have no thoughts of suicide. I'm happy with my life, even despite the lawsuit. I'm very happy. I've never had thoughts of suicide. And it will release one way or the other. Doesn't matter if I die. You're going to get the goodies on these disgusting people.
Okay. And is that going to be on your YouTube channel or your website?
It's going to simultaneously go out there and other places as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's pretty much all. Do you want to have some the final word?
Well, first, I need to express my gratitude. I have been continuously humbled by the prayer warriors that I've been able to meet, and there have been so many that I've never met who have prayed for me and my family and have provided a blanket of protection as we have endured this siege on our family and on our little hilltop. Everywhere I go, from coast to coast, from every Latin Mass that I attend, people come up to me and say, I've been fasting for you, or I've been praying for you, or I donated to your legal fund, or, and it's people that I've never met before, no relationship with. They've never emailed me. They've never texted. They've never told me anything. They never informed me that they were there, but I've been blown away, man. I was in Baltimore recently, and I met this woman who said that she has said multiple 54-day novenas for us, and that we would prevail against Church Militant. And so first of all, I have to say thank you for that, because we didn't defeat them in civil court and then in military court because I had the best lawyers in the world. I didn't, or because I'm the smartest guy in the world. I'm not. I truly believe we defeated them soundly and definitively by the prayers of all of you and by the intercession of certain saints, including Joan of Arc and Philomena and John Bosco. And so first of all, my thank you to all of those people. Secondly, my Thanksgiving to you, your hosts, Alan, and all of your audience, who I know are going to share this video. You're going to like it. You're going to get this message out there, because, my story is just one story of what Church Militant has done to people, what they're willing to do, how far they're willing to go, the extent of their malice, the extent of their vileness. And, ultimately, the reason why I wanted to do this interview is so that people know what they're willing to do and how far they're willing to go, so that we can stop them. And, if one guy stands up to them and says, I'm not going to take it, that could turn the tide against them. And that might stop it from happening to someone else. And then finally, I just need to say thank you to everyone who has donated to my legal defense. I wish it could have been more. I wish that my family, were not deprived of, of our means of survival. I wish that this lawsuit didn't cost us tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I wish that this never came to me. I wish that this cup could have passed from me, but nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt, O Lord. I don't regret at all standing up for a man who is accused of a crime who continues to assert his innocence. I believe that he is innocent until and unless proven guilty beyond the shadow of a doubt by a court of law, including a jury of his peers with irrefutable evidence. And until and unless Father James Jackson, FSSP, is proven guilty in a court of law by irrefutable evidence in front of a jury of his peers, until and unless that happens, I presume that he is innocent, and therefore he is a man fighting for his life. And I don't regret at all standing in the breach, shoulder to shoulder with another Marine, with another man of the holy face, come what will. Because I firmly believe what Father Ripperger teaches about the principled man. The principled man is someone who knows the principles, who lives by them, and most importantly, the third portion, regardless of what comes. We are not consequentialists as Catholics. We don't look back with our armchairs, 2020 vision and say, oh, well, that didn't turn out right, so I shouldn't have done it. No, I don't look at this whole siege, this saga that I've been through the lens of, if only I hadn't stood with Father Jackson, I could have avoided this penance. No, standing with Father Jackson was the right thing to do, come what may. Now, I wish that the come what may portion didn't cost us so much money, didn't deprive me of my livelihood, didn't mean that I'm unemployable, online as a so-called racist, Nazi, sexist, whatever. And to the extent that anyone in your audience is moved by any of this and says, hey, this really is an injustice, and it is, and the injustice will be corrected in the afterlife. I know that God's justice is perfect, but to the extent anyone wants to correct the injustice here now, you can go to givesendgo.com/defeatcmtv. Givesendgo.com/defeatcmtv. That's my legal fund. Tens of thousands still owed to lawyers. I think they overbilled. Yes. I'm happy that we won.
A lawyer overbilled? You don't say.
Yeah, right. I'm pleased with the outcome. I'm pleased with exposing the evil. I'm pleased that even this saga has turned me on to an even greater evil, which I'm going to continue to expose. So in the end, it is what it is, and we'll all see what happens at the general judgment. It's going to be quite interesting, I'm sure. And it'll be much must-see TV. But in the interim, I don't think it's fair that I have to labor under a lifetime of legal debt merely for standing up for a priest. And if you don't think that's fair either, I would be very much in your debt if anybody in your audience would help us out with that. But you don't have to do that. Like I'm not doing this video merely for that. This is not a fundraising video. I've never done a fundraising video. I'm not doing the interview just to fundraise or anything like that. I'm just pointing it out that like if you listen to this whole exchange and you say this is an injustice and I want to do something about it, you can do something about it. There is a way. You can go to givesendgo.com/defeatcmtv. But whether you do or you don't, the more important thing is that my final exhortation, my fourth point, which is that we pray for Father Jackson and for the abused children. For Father Jackson, that justice is served in this life. If he's innocent, that he be exonerated. If he's guilty, that he be condemned. And for all the children who are the abuse of this vile thing, they are often in these cases forgotten in all of this. And this exchange, this back and forth with Church Militant and the frivolous lawsuit, and then them supporting the LGBT agenda under oath to try to cancel me, the whole thing, none of it was about children. None of it had anything to do with children, and the children got lost in all of this. So pray for the victims of child abuse and human trafficking, which is much more prevalent today than most people think. There are more human slaves, human sex slaves on Earth today than at ever before in all of human history, possibly combined. And it is a real problem. Americans are a big part of it, and we in the Western hemisphere are a big part of it. And that part of it always gets lost in this discussion. So my fourth point: pray for Father Jackson, pray for abuse victims.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming on again. Perhaps you can come on sometime again in the future, possibly after you release all that information. We could promote it here. And yeah, if you want to come on for something else, just to talk about the faith at all, talk about our Lord, you're always welcome here. And thank you for coming.
Thank you, Al. I would be honored to do that. And I hope to be back soon.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everyone.